Hello, my name is Candace Waller, and I'm an author of Christian romance novels. I've written two books, What Goes Around Comes Around, and the sequel, Good Things Come. And I'm here with my author friend, Wendy Jones. And Wendy wrote this great book. It's called An Extraordinary Life. Can you see that? And it's the story of her mother, Josephine E. Jones. She was the first executive manager at a Fortune 500 company. And I read this story. I really love this book. And if you have a chance, I would recommend getting it because she talks about her mother. She brings it into a historical concept, and it's just context. And it's just a wonderful, warm story of this woman who, raised Wendy by herself and really went after her dreams in a time when women really weren't known for doing that. And especially Black women excelling in the area of corporate America. So I'm here with Wendy. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself and her second book. Wendy, please.
Yes. Hi, I'm Wendy Jones, and I'm the president of Ida Bell Publishing. And the first book was a long time in making, and I'll try to make this short because we don't have that much time. But essentially, I started in 1993. I walked into my mother's brownstone, and she was sitting in her, there's a parlor on the first floor. She was sitting in the parlor, which is like, well, actually it was the dining room. She's sitting in the dining room, and she was wearing black and the lights were off, and she looked depressed, and she'd raised me by herself. And I never saw her depressed. And I said, Mom, what's wrong? And she said, it doesn't seem as if I've done anything with my life. I said, you haven't done anything with your life? And as an only child who, I had cousins who came and played with me, and I had, 16 cousins, and I would go down every summer, so I wasn't lonely. But mostly when I was in the house, I was eavesdropping on every conversation. She talked to her sisters on the phone and stuff. So I thought I knew everything. I talked to her, and I found out things that I did not know.
Wow.
And I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I had finished a play, and the people weren't ready to put it on yet, so I had to find another writing project. And I said, this is it. And my mother gave me the way in, and I didn't think of it. I give her the credit. She, I just put a tape recorder on and said, listen, just start from the earliest memory and just talk. And then I'll ask you questions if I need clarification. And at one point she said, well, Black people didn't get Social Security to 1951. And I just, let the tape run. And then when I was transcribing it, I said, wait a moment, Black people didn't get Social Security until 1951. That can't be right. When I started reading, she was born in 1920 in South Carolina, a sharecropper's daughter. And so I started reading things that were written around her time period. And I was reading the 3-volume work by, it'll come to me, her name, the author, but she had finished the second volume about Eleanor Roosevelt. And in fact, I can look it up here because it's in the back, but I'll look it up later. So she had written this book about Eleanor Roosevelt. So I was in the second volume, and in the beginning of the chapter, she says that Social Security was very controversial. And at that time, the Democrats were still in the South. They called them the Dixiecrats. They did not want it passed. They did not want people to get unemployment. They did not want people to get old folks insurance. But they especially didn't want Black people to get it. So what they did was said, oh, everyone can get Social Security except people who work on farms, people who work part-time, people who do domestic work in people's houses, teachers, nearly all the things that Black people were relegated to. But they cut out 60% of Black men, 60% of all workers, and 80% of Black women.
But they paid into it, but they just couldn't get it out.
No, they did not get. 1935 was when the law was passed and Social Security began shortly after that. All right, Black people did not get Social Security until 1951. So the Black women who took care of their children and cooked their food, when they got too old to work, they had no pension. If they were fired, they had no unemployment. And this is what the Southern Democrats wanted. And this was the price, the compromise. They talk now about how the politicians can't compromise. Yeah, they used to compromise on our backs. They compromised us out of the law so they could pass it for other people. And they still cut out white people, and they still cut out women of all races, right? So, and that was what said to me, I've got to look at the history of the things she was fighting against. I hadn't thought about that. But then once I saw this, I said, let me just go into the history and see how it affected her in her life. So I wove that into her story. But she was the one who gave me that idea. I did not have that idea going in. I was just going to write her life and see what I could do with it as a writer. I didn't know where it was going to go. I had a hard time with the structure. I finally got an editor who helped me with the structure. But even then, I worked with 3 people who were had been in publishing altogether like 90 years. Each of them had been in publishing, all women who had been in publishing 30 years each, 2 editors and 1 agent. And 2 out of the 3 asked me, well, why did you include history? Why is history in this? And I said to myself, a Black woman in 1920 who becomes one of the first people in management in 1967, I'm not going to talk about history. You don't understand what happened if you don't talk about history. And she got that job, just briefly, just to wrap it up on that, she got that job by working first as a cook in private homes when she went to New York in 1946. She left South Carolina in 1946. She was 26 years old. And she went to work in people's homes. And eventually she got tired of having no hours, because although she was the cook, if the children got sick at 3 o'clock in the morning, the woman wanted her to wake up and deal with the children, which she did. But then she said, there are no hours to this. This just doesn't make sense. There was no sick leave. She fought to get sick leaves when she was sick because she got sick from nursing the woman's children, and then she wouldn't give her any money when she was off for a week with the flu. And she demanded the money and she got it. So eventually she went to temp work where she just worked, just on an hourly basis. And then she ended up at Standard Brands as a temp worker for 2 weeks to replace somebody. And she ended up staying 31 years and becoming the manager of the employees' cafeteria. Standard Brands made Planters peanuts and Royal Gelatin. So you've heard of them. They're now Kraft. They're Kraft now.
I mean, this is a story of Black history, really. It really is a story of Black history. And one woman, her dedication and, her working toward this and the obstacles. We feel we have obstacles today in corporate America. And I have someone, I was reading a book. I'm reading a book, very interesting book, and it's called Black Faces in White Places. And it's written by these 2 doctors. And they talk about how, as Black people, we how we can make it in corporate America. But what your mother went through is, I can't even imagine. Like, I had stress doing corporate America, but what she went through, I can't even, I say all hail to the queen, because she was able to persevere, to keep her confidence, her decorum. It was such a different time. Like, racism that we may experience is nothing compared to what your mother experienced. And she was able to achieve. And she was able to bring up her daughter. She was able to get her house. I mean, this story, this is her story. So that's why I say to people, you really should check out this book, because it's a piece of our history that, Wendy has brought this out, that we wouldn't have known if her mother hadn't been depressed that day, which I'm sorry that she was, but in a way I'm glad, because if she hadn't, we would not have had this wonderful story that talks about the history as far as Black women and Black people. And it's an inspirational story. Because when I was going through stress, and I thought about the stress of being in corporate America, when I thought of what this little tiny woman, she's a little woman. How much did you weigh? 100 pounds?
110, 115, that's something like that.
Tiny little lady went through, and how she had to carry herself. It automatically made me feel like I could achieve. If she could do it, then I could do it, because I didn't go through what she went through. Absolutely did not. So I just think that, I'm so happy that you were able to bring this story out. And I think, Wendy, what you were alluding to is that you kind of give your mother a little bit of a purpose toward the latter part of her life. Would you say that's true?
Yes, I would, because, it was hard enough, just her marriage broke up when I was 6 months old. So from the time I was 6 months old on, she was the sole provider. So that was hard enough. But if she was going to think that her life was nothing, and as I said, I did not realize until an editor pointed it out to me in 12th draft or something, she was probably the first manager in a black woman manager in a Fortune 500 company. I didn't think about that. It hadn't occurred to me. 1967, the Civil Rights Act was 1965, right? 1964, and the Voting Rights Act was 65. So nobody was in place to be in the corporation. This was a corporation that didn't even have Black janitors or Black mail carriers, people in the mailroom. So it wasn't like, well, there was someone there who had potential and we worked them up. There was no one to work up to anything. right? So she was the only Black person in the building when she went in there in 1953. That wasn't true by the time of 1967, but there was no one who had her experience and was able to move up because they'd just gotten in, you
That
see.
must have been so hard for her to go in there, be the only Black person in this court. I mean, what she must have experienced on a regular basis. Like, I can't even imagine what that was like for her.
Well, the thing is that as hard as things were, she was befriended by the lawyer. She had some trouble with my birth, paying the bill, because my father had left and they were dunning her for the money and they were going to garnish her salary. And they don't do that at companies like that. And they told her they would help her. And the lawyer, made her come to his office and talk to him. And he said, I will talk to the people at Flower Fifth Avenue Hospital. They don't need the money like this. You can give it to them in installments as you offered to do. They wanted it $150 at once, which was a lot of money to her. You know, she was making $42.50 a week or something. And she had to pay rent and everything. But the point is that she made friends with that lawyer in the corporation because of that, because he had been poor, and he eventually became the president. Right? So she didn't go to him for everything, but she had someone in her corner. But she had a lot. They were Black people who resented her in power, as well as white people.
Wow.
There were
And
men who
she
didn't
built
want to work.
relationships, right?
Yeah,
She was able to build relationships, which
she
is
built
important in business. Business is all about relationship. And sometimes you have to cross the divide. It can't just be people that look like you or your same gender. She crossed a white man. He was wealthy. He was probably educated. And he was someone kind of mentored her, kind of looked out for her. And she was able to build that bridge, which is amazing in itself, considering the time.
Yeah, well, he had been poor. He said he had to wait tables to get through college. He had been poor. So there were a lot of people who saw her as someone that they wanted to help because they could see that she had, drive and ambition, and they admired her courage. And he said, and he even brought me in when I graduated from, I didn't know this story, but he brought me in, about, my childhood, about the birth, about the bill. But when I graduated from college, he brought me in to his office. He was president now, to talk to me about what my future might be, what I might be interested in doing.
Oh, that was wonderful. So that relationship not only extended to her, but extended to you. So that's another good thing that she was able to do. And see, that's what you have to understand. A lot of times too, when we go into different corporations and we're very different, like, if you're a Black woman, I used to be a sports journalist. I'll just put it on the table. And I
Oh,
would go in
wow.
there,
That's wonderful,
and
Candace.
let me tell you something. These men were like, you're a woman, you're Black, you're short. I never played a sport. So I went in there trying to get interviews. It was very hard, but I had a lot of drive. And I would even when I was in college, I used to I wanted to be like the number one journalist ever. So I would chase and harass athletes every time I saw them. And I had an in because I was a student like they were a student. So the media could not approach an athlete, but because I was a student, I could. So I would try to get them. I would chase. I remember I chased some guy. He was at the bus stop. He had broke his leg. I chased him on the bus. He was like, oh my goodness, who is this girl? She crazy. I was like, you from the track team? He was like, yeah. I said, yeah, I need to talk to you. He was like, he started to run. Eventually he gave in. They all gave in because I was like notorious and very persistent. Yeah. And I wanted to be a great journalist. And what I'm hearing from you is that drive, people recognize drive, no matter what race you are. If you have drive and determination and a standard that you want to be excellent, even if you're not there yet, but you're striving to be excellent, somebody's going to recognize you, even if they don't look like you or share your economic status or live in your neighborhood. And that's what your mother was. She was a woman on excellence. She believed in excellence, the way she put things together, the way she did her stuff. And I know you're going to talk about the second book, which goes into more detail of how her presentation. She was a woman of excellence. And when you're a person of excellence, you get noticed. And you get noticed by people, not just look like you, but everybody. Anybody can notice that. Yeah, and that's what she was able to do. And that's why I love the book, because that's what I saw when I read this book. I said, this woman went through a lot, being a single mom by herself. The husband, I don't know what was going on with him. It wasn't so great. And she was able to achieve because she had a feeling and a drive to be excellent. And that's what you're going to get when you read this book. You're going to be inspired. I was very inspired. And I wish I had met her. I almost felt from reading this that I had met her and that she was someone that I could have a conversation with and ask her, and that she would be able to tell me stuff. And she actually spoke to me through this book because I said, wow, she went through this. And how did she handle that? And, and she was very open about her life. She said, this is what happened. And Wendy's done a wonderful job capturing the voice of her mother. So that's why I really love the book. I can't wait for the second book. So tell us about the second book, okay? It's related to this one. So tell us about that.
Okay, the second book, and let me bring up the cover first.
Let's see it. Oh wow.
I can get it in the I've got something where I have to.
Okay.
And then you come up here.
Wow.
And maybe I
Okay.
should come back. Maybe that's
Yeah, that's
better.
perfect. So that's good.
Yeah.
So this is her portfolio, right?
Yeah. See, this is okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. This is actually her portfolio with a few additions. The first book is her life, and it has these pictures in it, and they're in color, but they're small. And people kept saying to me, you should make a book with the pictures in it. And I did have a Staples book that I just put together for the people who were doing the writing the praise on the back, and that had the pictures in a larger format. And I said, yeah, I can do that. And people said, well, yeah, we made a great cookbook. I said, it's not a cookbook. They said, oh, a great how-to book. I said, it's not a how-to book. And I said to myself, I have to make sure people understand. It doesn't have recipes. It doesn't tell you how to do what she did. She took fruits and vegetables and made them art, and you could still eat them, right? So this is her portfolio. Just like you look at a book of Picasso's, and you'd open it up and you see these wonderful artworks. Well, these were artworks that you could eat. And the text tells you what the ingredients were, the process she used to create them. It's not a how-to book because my mother didn't take a course. She didn't read a book. She didn't draw a little sketch of what she was going to do. It was in her head. And this is a woman who could take a paring knife, a small fruit knife, and an apple and carve it, and the peel would not be broken. That was the kind of skill she had. So for the most part, she used regular knives. She didn't use fancy gadgets. The only thing, sometimes she would use a meat slicer to do very thin. There's one picture in there that has some honeydew that is sliced on a meat slicer. But for the most part, these were just straight knives that you'd have in your home. So the first book was her life, and it has the pictures, but not focused on them. And this is her work. And then I also tell a story about it, because one of them is a picture of the fruit bowl that used to sit on the dining room table. I didn't have a desk, but I didn't need a desk. I had a dining room table. I could spread out my books. The fruit bowl was there. And just before I did math, which is my worst subject, I'm an English major, right? Just before I did math, I'd grab an apple. It had already been washed. And I would start eating it because I needed all my brain cells to be working to get through this math homework. And I think my mother put it there so that I would have, orange or tangerine or an apple to eat rather than some junk food. Yeah, we had cakes and that sort of thing. My mother baked a cake every week when I was in elementary, when we didn't have any lunch room and you had to bring your own lunch. But because sweets were in my house as a norm, I was never overboard. And we had lots of fruit and vegetables. So these are fruits and vegetables and a few desserts. I think there's one dessert in there. And all of it is, there are excerpts from the first book that relate to what this particular piece of art. Maybe she's talking about how she creates, or what's important in food presentation, and about life. So she has some of the things that Candace is talking about, but the first book is her life in her voice. That's another thing. The people who were interested in the book wanted it to be in my voice, and I said no. She has a voice. She's a story. In fact, she's the one. Between my mother and my grandmother, that is why I'm a writer. They were storytellers. I put it down on paper, but that was an oral history. I actually just turned on the tape, and then I had to rearrange and cut out the ums and ahs. But when you read that book, that is my mother's voice. And what Candace said, I'm so happy that she felt that she was in her presence, because I wanted it to encourage people. And this other book is about her. It focuses on her art.
What's the title?
It's called The Culinary Art Portfolio of Josephine E. Jones. I'll put it up again.
Culinary Art Portfolio of Josephine E. Jones. Okay.
Oh, and also the prints in here, like the one on the cover. Let's see, I can do this.
Okay, wow.
All right. This can be taken out and framed.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there's nothing on the other side. So let me show you here. See, there's nothing, there's no, well, wait a minute, hold on. It's glossy paper, okay? There's nothing on the other side, so you're not tearing up the book, but you
Okay, I
are
see.
you're taking out that picture and you're framing it.
Oh, wow. It's beautiful.
Okay, yeah, there we go. There we
Hmm.
go. And this picture is on my screensaver because it inspires me. All right, so when I look at it, I'm getting ready to do my writing, I can see that, and I'm inspired by my mother's artistry. So this is a book that, there isn't a movie or a song or a book that can take away all the problems that we've gone through, the people who have died and we couldn't hold their hand and we couldn't memorialize them, and the people who've lost jobs, all these things. Nothing will take that away, but maybe you'll have an hour of pleasure and be able to put up a picture that you can look at to help you through this, because we all need help. We need to help each other. And seeing the fruits of someone's creativity and that someone managed to get through these obstacles means we together will get through these obstacles. And she helped other people. She helped her family sometimes too much, but she was always a giving person. She was always someone who wanted to help people. And I feel the same way, because I didn't get whatever I do or whatever I've done is from other people, my parent, my mother, the people in the neighborhood who told my mother, oh, your daughter didn't go to school today. Well, I went to a private school, so I had a different schedule, but they were looking out for me. They saw this woman trying to raise this child alone. They wanted to help her. So they wanted to make sure that I did what I was supposed to do. So she didn't think they were nosy neighbors. She said, oh, thank you, I appreciate that, but she has a different schedule. She's on vacation, all right?
Okay. So, what I wanted to talk about too is that I met Wendy at an event, a book event at the Springfield Public Library. And we had done like a publishing event. And I talked to her in February of 2019. And I talked to her because she has a very, I think, unique way of selling the book. The book's not available on Amazon. You have to go to Wendy's website to get the book. So I posted this article. I'm going to link it in the description below, about what she did, and people have been checking out this article. I published it February of 2019, and I've published 80 articles or so on my site, and she's still in the top 10. So it's like this article has resonated with people of how she sold her book without using Amazon. So I want her to talk about what was her strategy of marketing the book. So you heard that she went through editor, she had a developmental, a copy editor, and she did that, got it the best she could be after transcribing it from her mom. But how did she market this book and sell it without using Amazon? So I'm going to let Wendy answer that question.
Okay, well, first of all, the first book I did as much as I could in terms of the money, and as Candace said, I made sure that the book itself was as good as I could make it. So a developmental editor is the one that looks at structure, and that's what I needed help with. What to put where? Is there too much information here? Not enough information there? They look at the big picture. The copy editor looks at, is this the right word? Is it spelled correctly? It does the proofreading, the commas, the semicolons, all of that. All right, and you have to have both. And also, I had a friend who's a illustrator. She gave me some help in terms of her price, because I couldn't afford what she's actually worth. But she gave me some help with that, so we got the best of everyone. Now, I had used my own money, but then I still needed. It looked like I needed to hire a publicist, and I didn't have the money, and so I went through my email list and contacted people, and I made another artist friend. I live in a neighborhood where there are 3 artists in walking distance, so I'm very fortunate, and they're all friends of mine. And this is before I started writing the book, so I didn't seek them out because of the book. We were already friends. And this other artist helped me do a video, and it was a fundraising video, and I explained what I was doing. And some of these people go back to 7th and 8th grade. And some of the people had just, met me 2 years ago. So I explained who I was, and I gave links so you could look me up. Don't ever give anybody money you don't know who they are. Maybe they're just taking money, for something that's not real. And people did give me money, not as much as I actually needed, but they gave from their heart, and that was what was good. So I still had enough to start with. And so the person who was one of the people who was an editor was a final editor of the book, a developmental editor. She was also a publicist, so she did the publicity. All right, so these people who gave me money, I said to them, if you give me more than the price of the book, you get the book, because you've already bought it, right? And as I said, people were very generous. So I had a list of people already who were going to buy the book before the book was published.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And now they call it pre-order. I didn't know that at the time, but that's what it was. And at the launch party. And then, so I had these people, and then every time after that, I would go on, I realized that I was too much on the computer. I was looking at things, and I'm not much into social media because I got into social media for another business I had where I help people with their I'm a former English professor, so I help people write an essay. I don't write it for them, but I'm, looking at their draft and telling them what they need to fix, that kind of thing, and also SAT prep and stuff. So I had been on social media for that briefly, but it just didn't feel right. And when something doesn't feel right, I don't do it, no matter who tells me to do it. So I didn't want to get too involved with them. The publicist was doing something on Facebook, but I said, I've got to get off the computer. I've got to talk to people. So my second home is the library. So I asked, they had the launch party there. And eventually I said, well, I'll go to other libraries and give the talk about the book. And I went to the neighborhood libraries, and they were all very welcoming. Now, I don't charge libraries because they let me sell my book. And I don't know where you are, but in New Jersey now, you also have to charge sales tax. So look into that for your state to make sure that you're doing it legally. And so some people signed up on my list, for the email list. So now I have like 102 people on my email list, and I send out to them. So it's the email list through Independent Book Publishers Association, and Candace is going to put links to all of this, which is an association I belong to as an independent publisher. And the difference between self-publishing and independent publishing, eventually I'm going to publish other people. And in fact, I do have, the photographer is a late photographer, but I will eventually be working with someone who is an illustrator for a children's book we're going to be doing. So you have to, as an independent publisher, you can publish some of your own stuff, but you also have to publish other people. If you're self-published, now, the thing is now people go through Create Space and that sort of thing, but you could do that with your own publishing company, right? But you're doing it through these other avenues. If you do it through those other avenues, you close a lot of doors. Most of the librarians are not interested in books that are published that way because most people don't go through the editing process. They just, the people take your money and they get the book and they don't try to improve it. I'm sure that's not true for every book, but it happens so often that they just don't look at it. I wanted to be taken seriously. I wanted a Library of Congress number. An Extraordinary Life, Josephine E. Jones, is in the Schomburg, which is the New York Public Library's Black Research Center.
Oh, I didn't know that. Congrats.
Yes, it was accepted to the Schomburg. And why? Because it was a good quality book. If it were just something that I had just run off, right, and there were mistakes all in it, and there were errors and stuff, they wouldn't want it. So that's the level of book that I want to create, that the Schomburg, so now scholars can get it, right? And it's and I've done this with other libraries. In fact, there are libraries, I didn't even know how it got there. It's in the Princeton Library. I think somebody sent it there, right?
Wow. Okay.
I think somebody bought a copy and sent it. And that happened from the very beginning. I was, Independent Book Publishers Association has an award called the Benjamin Franklin Award, and they have different categories. I must tell you, I got into 6 categories, did not get anything. And I was cussing up a storm in the kitchen, but of course you never do this publicly, right? You never write to a reviewer who pans your book and calls them the son of somebody else, You don't do any of that except in your kitchen. So, but you act professionally, because if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, right? Your book is not going to be loved by everybody. So while I was doing this, occasionally I put the title in, and it came up that it was in the Wisconsin Historical Society. And I thought, this was the first year. And the only place I had sent it was to the Independent Book Publishers Association. Someone who, because they give you their critique, they tell you what they liked and didn't like, the cover, they look at everything, right? And this person had liked it and said, oh, everyone should read this book. I think that person sent it to the Wisconsin Historical Society, but I will never know because the judges are anonymous. But that's the sort of thing I mean. Somebody said, this is important. This needs to be in a historical society, and it's in Princeton Library for the same reason. I sent out something to the Black Historical. I went to all the places where I thought people would be interested. The historically Black colleges, I sent them emails about it. I did something with the American Library Association. Is one of the conventions that Independent Book Publishers Association goes to. Yes, you pay your entrance fee, but then you have to pay for these programs, but you get a discount. But you will have to pay money for the programs. The programs are not free with your membership, which is $139 for anyone who is in a small company, 1 to 9 employees, or just one person who's an independent publisher or an author, right? So they take your book to these conventions. You can't afford maybe to go to Chicago. Now you can't go anywhere, but they were in Chicago. They took the book there, and a librarian saw it, and somebody sent me an email and said, oh, we have to have this book. Send us this book. Now, it's true, the libraries will take 3 months to pay you, but they will pay you, right? And they won't return the book. I do not go to independent bookstores or any bookstores because there is a custom started in the First Depression of having returns. That is, they'll get your book, they don't pay for it until someone buys it, and then if no one buys it, they send it back to you, right? 6 months later, right? So there, one case by case, there might be a bookstore that doesn't do that, but that's what's generally done. So I don't deal with them for that reason. But the libraries will get your book and they will keep your book. They will not return it. You say, well, that's only one copy, right? Yeah, well, there are 100,000 libraries in the United States.
Yeah. Library is a big market. If you can get into that market and you can, like History Month and other things, and you can get into there, it gets take off a life of its own.
Yeah.
If you get to enough libraries, absolutely.
Right. And also, I have done this. I know you have. I'm a library rat because I can't afford to read, to buy the books I want. I read about a book a week. I can't afford that, right? I'm not saying the books are overpriced. I'm just saying I can't afford it. But you go to the library, you get a book and say, this is a great book. I'm going to buy this for myself, or I'm going to buy it for Christmas for somebody or for a birthday, right? So it's in the library. People will pick up a book that's $30 and they couldn't afford to buy it, but they would look at it and read it and say, okay, in 6 months, I'm going to buy this book. Right? So there you have an audience. So the libraries, and through Independent Book Publishers Association, I want to trace this. There was a program they had where they sent your information out like press releases, except it was on the computer. You gave them a brief description of your book, hard for me to be brief, 25 words, all the information about your book, and then they sent it out to magazines, and they had a lot of different subjects, and you could say, well, I want it sent out to people interested in the Great Migration, and I did that. And Black Enterprise, the digital edition, was interested. The woman bought the book, interviewed me, okay, and then a little while later, a woman got in touch with me and said, I saw that you had a book about your mother, and I'm doing a book about Black women in business, and I want to interview you for my book. So she interviews me for that book. And then the next year, which is this year, she was supposed to be on, I don't know if you know On Point, which is on NPR. Mm-hmm. I think it's WGBH, comes out of Boston. I used to listen to it all the time. They wanted to interview the woman who was writing this book, but she couldn't make it. So she got them in touch with me, and they interviewed me for 20 minutes. And I was on with, I can't remember the Republican's name, and also Cory Booker. And they were talking about baby bonds. Oh, and the professor, I should remember his name, because that the professor who's the person who's saying that we should give some money to children who are who when they're little, so that they can use for college or for business. And so they interviewed me about my mother's experience. So all that came through that one promotion of the sending out with IBP to Black Enterprise, right? And I also got several sales from that article in Black Enterprise, in addition to this woman who got in touch with me. So one thing leads to another, right? People will connect. They say, oh, there's someone who's in this area and you should talk to them. So look at who would be interested in reading my book. Just look at about 3 people. I'm looking at people interested in Black history. For the second book, I'm looking at people interested in art and photography, food, and history. So where am I going to look? Online communities now, because you can't go out, that are involved in those 3 areas. Maybe there's a blog where a person says, here's a good book on this subject that you were interested in, right? And I've also gotten into a program called NetGalley through Independent Book Publishers Association. You send a digital version of your book, in other words, your galleys. Yes, again, you have to pay for it, but you get 6 months of exposure to reviewers, librarians, people with blogs, and they review the book. So far, there have been 6 reviews. I started on December 2nd, and they're all favorable. And I've already sent for permission to use them for the praise for my book. I have 2 people who've already written praise. You know how you look on the back and you see, oh, this person liked the book. Well,
yes.
in this particular book, there isn't a back because there's another picture, which I'll show you. But there is, I will have a page of praise. But this is the back of the book.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And that's what I mean. My mother just used regular materials, like that French chef cutting knife, that butcher knife. That's all she used. Okay. And this was done with a machine, but the other stuff was not. So yeah, so one thing leads to another. Do your research, just dig, but don't have more than 3 areas that you're looking at, and have some kind of focus. My focus is libraries and people who are interested in that particular subject. Your focus may be bookstores. Maybe you can get around, or maybe you don't mind the returns. This is like a buffet. Everything I say is not going to be applicable to you. You take, what makes sense to you. And you may have a group on Facebook that is interested. My group is African American Literary Book Club. That's another group that
Troy Johnson, right?
Yeah, that's Troy Johnson. And they have advertisements and reviews. Now I'll tell you, it seems to me you get more sales from reviews than advertisements, unless you're already known in that field. Now, okay. I'm new in this, so maybe if they say, oh, Wendy Jones has written a book about such and such, and I always wanted to get her next book, maybe, but you still need to advertise, but you won't get that much return on investment. You won't say, oh, I've got an ad up, 10 people will buy my book. I mean, you just don't get enough from an ad unless you're already established, I think. And
you pay for reviews, right? On AALBC, right?
That's right. These are paid reviews, okay, because they have to pay the reviewer. Now, that doesn't mean that you will get a positive review. My review was mixed, but as Candace pointed out to me, if you just read the first 2 paragraphs and said, I want the book, and a good review, it was well written. Okay. I didn't agree with the opinion, but it was well written. A good review will say, here's the book, and here's why I liked it or didn't like it. And you may say, well, you didn't like it, but I like it. So the review was well written. The person I got 2 people bought books from that review, even though it was mixed. And one of them was a mentor that I had lost touch with, was a mentee that I'd lost touch with, a writer who herself is fabulous, Kim Coleman Foote. You'll be hearing more about her. She's written wonderful stuff. She hasn't written a novel yet that's been published, but she has a wonderful book that should be published. And maybe when I get my act together, I can publish it, because it's being disregarded for the wrong reasons, for the wrong reasons. It's not because it's not a good book. And she's won lots of awards and that sort of thing. So my point is this: you can get an area, you dig into it for your book. Just think about the people. Now, they do talk about comp books. I found for Black books, usually is no comparable book, right? They'll tell you, look at a book that's similar to yours and see what they're doing for their promotion and copy them. Now, I looked for a comparable book for An Extraordinary Life of Josephine E. Jones. I looked for a book about an unknown person with color pictures. I didn't even look for a Black person. I could not find it. I found a book on Rita Moreno. You know who she is. She's won every award in entertaining. She's won the Grammy. She's won this. They had a paperback book, and everything was black and white. Wouldn't even give color pictures to Rita Moreno, right? So I had color pictures in a paperback book, and I had to make the price higher than it would have been if it were black and white, because they were color pictures. But I try to keep the price as low as possible. I want people to be able to get it. Remember, you have to, if you're going to sell to either to libraries or bookstores, what is their discount that they want? you have to factor that into your price. For libraries, 40% is fine, right? But for the bookstores, they want 55%, some want 65%. So you're going to have to do other things to support the book. I did, before COVID, was able to go to a college and speak, and they have funds for the different activities they were celebrating Black History Month. And I was doing Black History Month and Women's History Month. Think about where your book fits into these various things. And there's a calendar of different days. There may be a day for chocolate cake, and you've got a book about desserts. You can say, okay, you need to do this for this day because it's a chocolate cake day. So look at all the things that connect with your book, right? But again, just look at 3 different areas for your audience, because if you scatter yourself out, you're not going to do well. You have to go deep into what you're doing.
Okay, you need concentration. You need to find places that would be interested in your book, because you did this without getting this book on Amazon. So these are the tips you're sharing. It's basically, all right, you joined the Independent Book Publishers Association, because that gave you a lot of leeway in terms of classes, in terms of networking, and help you get into magazines, and help you get on NPR. Like, you really got a lot of bang for your buck for the membership. And then you went to Troy Johnson, the AALBC, and got a review there, because there are a lot of Black readers. Because this book appeals to Black readers, but not only, but that's one of the primary audiences. So you went there to kind of say, okay, I know people go here, they read books, they buy books, so my book needs to be reviewed here. And even though you paid for review, it wasn't, oh, we love it, love it, love it. There were things they liked and didn't like about the book, but still, because the review was so well written and honest, you were able to get sales from that.
That's right.
And then you talked about concentrating on who appeals to your book. So, like, I write romances, so I'm going to do people who want to read romances, Christian romances, clean Christian romances. And you kind of use those kind of key of where they are. So you can do that on social, because now your thing is libraries. We're not doing libraries in person, but they are doing events via Zoom. So you can still do that. But you looked for where they are. And that's what people have to do. And one of the things I liked about the article that I wrote, which I'm going to link, is that you said that even if you get on Amazon, doesn't mean you're going to make a lot of sales. You still have to do the same things, because there's so many books being published. How do you get found if you're not targeting who's going to read it? Like, your top 3 targets of anybody can read your book, but who are the top 3 that are going to want to read the book? And then you're concentrating on connecting with that group. That's what I'm hearing. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. And I just want to say something about the webinars available to you on Independent Book Publishers Association. Again, I have learned so much. Some of it I didn't want, some of it worked for me. A webinar, as you know, is online. We were always online, even before COVID, right? Because it's a national organization. Well, they were normally, for members, $19 each. They started offering last year a 50% discount if you signed up for 12, so $9.50 each. And this year they're having an online conference, which is not as much as it would be if you had to pay for hotels, but still is some money. But if you sign up for that, you get them for $6 each, 6 times 12, right? But even the $9.50, you get 12 different ones. We have things like how to write a bio, how to sell from your website. That's one of the ones that is appearing in this year's webinars. I think it's February, all right? There are 12 of them. But again, Candace will be linking to them. You can find out that information. How to write your bio. Let's see what else. There were just all kinds of different things. What your book cover should look like. Now, they tell the industry standard is $2,000 for a book cover. I can't afford anywhere near that. But I must caution you against using Fivers, because number one, you're exploiting another artist. All right, paying somebody $5 for some work, that's close to enslavement, right? And number two, you probably won't get good quality work anyway, right? So pay what you can. Obviously, you can't pay $2,000, but if you find a professional artist, work with them, see if you can find something, and maybe they'll let you give them some money now and some later. Tell them I can't afford all of it now, but you don't have to pay $2,000 is what I'm saying. The people who have that kind of money, fine, but I certainly don't. I don't know many people starting out who do. But you want the cover sells the book, and then people will come back because the writing is good. But the people say, oh, that's interesting. Their eye, just like with food, right? If it doesn't look good, you're not going to taste it. The cover sells the book. right?
People judge a book by the cover,
Yeah,
absolutely. And you definitely have to, when you're doing covers, you have to look at, how it's looked, the wording on it, that patterns the picture, like, working with, and that's hard too, finding the right artist to work with you and kind of bring your vision to the forefront. And there are other places that you don't have to use this Fiverr, but I mean, even when Fiverr, they have things where they charge more than $5. Like, you can put in
that's
for
it.
that. You
Hmm.
know, it depends on what you're trying to get. And I think what you've done is really, I think the first thing that you really try to do was put the best product out that you could.
Yeah,
Like, that was what you really did. You really put the time, money, effort into making sure this is a quality book. Because if not, this book wouldn't have made it into the libraries. Like you
no,
said, they're not going to take a book that has typos. This looks like something that could be in the library. Like, this looks like something I could put in the library. And
yeah,
that's what you did. And because you did that early and you put time, money, and effort into it, it was able to get reviewed by Black Enterprise. It was able to get into libraries, and you're still pushing and promoting it to this day. So I
yeah.
think that is great.
In fact, you
Okay.
get a discount on the website when you go to get the culinary art portfolio. If you buy the first book along with the culinary, if you buy both books together, you get 10% off An Extraordinary Life. All right, so you get 10% off that first book if you buy the first and the second book together. And another thing I want to say is, remember, this is a community. I understand that in business people compete. I'm in the right business. I was an only child. I'm not into competition. I didn't have siblings to fight for anything, right? So my point is that in the book business, people do help each other, and in the end, it helps you, because then when they get somewhere, I mean, like Candace and I met at a book event that I helped start because my life partner had found out that they were having independent authors book programs all over the country, and the librarian didn't know about it. They were doing it in all libraries, and we reached out and we got these writers together. Now, we didn't sell as much as we would singly, but I think it's more important that we have community, and now I have a community of writers. So when I find out something about the writing world, I tell them. Now, they can use it or not use it. But what I like about African American Literary Book Club, and what you must remember, you have to have community. You can't just show up online, I got a book to sell, I got a book to sell. No, you got to help somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to have a community. You just can't show up to sell your book and leave, right? And that's the way I feel about African American Literary Book Club and also IBPA. We help each other. We help each other. And if you're not going to do that, you're not going to do well. Because people are going to see, oh, that person just here to sell her book. She's not even going to help anybody. She's not going to give anybody information. You get information, you spread it around,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what you do. All
The
right.
community is definitely important in working with people. And sometimes the community you find, it may not be people you know. Like, I've worked with people that I've met online that have been very helpful. And there are people that live down the street from me or live in my neighborhood who aren't. So you have to be open of who that is when you talk about community, because we want to, like you said, we want to help people reach their goals. And when you help other people, it comes back to you. And that's what we're really trying to get. Is there anything else that you want to tell me about your publishing in we only have a couple minutes left. So
Okay.
is anything else you want to tell me about this process, or any
I can't,
advice you want to give?
I guess the main thing is just you decide what your vision is, all right? And no one can tell you that, right? My vision is that I wanted to make the best possible book. My publishing company is named Ida Bell, after Ida B. Wells Barnett, the investigative reporter who's one of the first civil rights heroes.
Mhm.
And I want to have people who have not had a voice be published by this publishing company. And I want it at the level of the integrity that that woman showed in her life, Ida B. Wells Barnett, right? So that's my vision, right? And I want to do that by making the best possible book and making sure that as much as possible, the people who work with me get paid as much as possible what they're worth. And when I can afford to pay more, I'll pay more, right? But everyone, it's like that expression that was prevalent in the 19th century, lift as you climb. That was a Black organization, women's organization that had that motto. I think it was Mary Church Terrell. I may be wrong about that, but it's the 19th century. Lift as you climb, all right? We are in this together. We're going to help each other, and we're going to succeed together.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I'm so happy that you're able to come up and give us some more great tips on how to do this and how to, really truly being independent and, selling from your website. You started from there and then networking and all these organizations that you mentioned. We're going to definitely put in the link. So when will your second book be available?
The book launch is May 20th, 2021,
Okay.
and it is ready for pre-order now and will be probably through February, maybe even longer because things have been delayed a little bit. But yeah, you can pre-order from the website before May 20th, 2021. And I'll let you know what the date is. The date will be on the website. That's not clear about the pre-order. But the book launch, even if it's online, it'll be May 20th, 2021.
Okay, that sounds great. So hopefully we can talk again closer to that time and you can give
Oh,
me some
yeah.
more great tips. And I
Yeah.
thank you so much, Wendy, for joining us today. Like I said, I would definitely get her book. This one I really, really loved. And she has the next one coming out. But I read this one, An Extraordinary Life, Josephine E. Jones. I mean, this Black woman did amazing things. And Wendy brought the story to life. So if you're looking for something to read, Black History Month, I would recommend this book. You'll learn a lot. It really will tell you how this woman was able to overcome. And it really puts into today, because today there's a lot of stuff going on and we're talking about diversity. And this woman really was like the first ancestor really of seeing that in that situation and how she handled difficult situations with calm and class and tact, and how she, she just was a woman that loved and wanted to help people. She had a very giving nature and she was very good at what she did. And she actually got a certificate in this area and how she took care of things. And she had adversity, like Wendy said, from her own community and also the larger community at large. And so she really had a lot to overcome. And I'm really so happy that I got a chance to read this book. I highly recommend it. And I thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
I'm
you.
a writer myself, so I wanted to bring in my writer friends, Wendy, and, because we have to, like you said, support each other. So thank you so much. And, you can check out my blog, CandiceWaller.com. I'll have links to the 2 articles I did on Wendy at my blog. So check us out. And I just hope you guys have a great day. This is Candice Waller. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for
Bye.
having me.
All right. I stopped the video.
Okay, very good. Very
Start.
good. Okay, I think that went well. I think I got everything across. I just, yeah, because I actually wrote a lot of stuff just so I'd have it in my head because I was asking questions I thought you would ask so I could respond. So how do you think it went?